If you've been keeping up with our latest videos, you'll see that we've been digging along the riverfront, and we thought we'd take a minute to look at some of the historical descriptions of the shoreline before the APVA acquired the property in 1893. And we'd also like to talk about the first attempts to stop the shoreline erosion before the seawall was built. I'll give you a hint, it involves these wooden pilings behind me out in the water, and no, they aren't part of James Fort's walls. My name is Mariana Richardson Hartley, and welcome to another episode of Dig Deeper. Okay, decades before the APVA acquired the property, there were many descriptions of how the bank along the shoreline here was being undercut by the waves. And an artist in the 19th century, Robert Sully, visited the island and described the bank as having been washed away, kind of revealing an ochre that was just leaving a sandy beach behind. Later on in the 19th century, another artist visits with his sketchbook, Benson Lawson, and he talks about walking along the beaches and picking up historical artifacts from Jamestown's past. And he talks about finding fragments of gun parts, keys, and all sorts of tobacco pipes. He also mentions something called Jamestown diamonds, which we think are a reference to some of the glass trade beads that we find here at Jamestown. The artifacts that Sully and Lawson talk about finding along the beaches here at Jamestown are probably eroding from the pits, cellars, and wells that were close to the river, and then as the shoreline has eroded away, those artifacts were just dropping onto the beach from the features. Okay, this was one of the first features that I remember finding after my archaeological field school here in 2003. I worked with senior archaeologist Dave Givens and Carter Hudgens to come up against this bank and dig the first test unit to see how much was left of the fort in this area. And we found the palisade, but I remember scraping along the top of the bulwark trench and finding my first copper jeton, seeing the beads that were starting to show up from this dark soil stain. And the next year in 2004, I came back and worked with Dave on screening the artifacts as they dug into the bulwark trench, and just finding handfuls of Nueva Cadiz beads and ceramics and bones and all the normal stuff that we see from the early fort period out here, dated to 1607, 1610. And it just made you sad that so much of that bulwark trench had been eroded into the water, and so thankful for the seawall protecting the rest of what was there. By the time the APVA acquired the property, part of the State House foundations had already been lost to erosion, and they were worried that the church tower could be next. So Mary Jeffrey Galt talked to the organization about lobbying Congress to come up with funds to build a revetment to stop the erosion. And they finally got $10,000 towards that project in the Rivers and Harbors Act of 1894. The first idea that the government had in order to stop the erosion was to build a breakwater, and they hired a bunch of government contractors from South Carolina, many of them African-American men, to build this breakwater. And what they had in mind was to level out the shoreline, grade and turf it, and then add these huge granite stones to kind of face over the surface of the bank. They also added these wooden pilings that you see still standing out in the water today, which are kind of a hydraulic structure that's extending out into the water to interrupt the waves as they come in and also build up sediment on the bank. So it's pretty amazing. There are 4 of these that are still out in the water. You can see them today, not part of the fort wall, but part of the original efforts to try to stop the shoreline erosion. Unfortunately, the breakwater was unsuccessful pretty much from the start. From 1895 till 1896, during the winter, the storms just came and kind of sucked all of the soil out from under the rocks so that they fell, and they had to start all over again trying to figure out a way to stop the erosion the following year. So after the breakwater failed, the APVA went to Congress again, lobbied for more money to try to build something to stop the erosion, and they finally completed this seawall at the beginning of the 20th century. And we're back in this area to kind of assess the seawall and see what damage has been done during that over a century now of protecting the island. We're also very excited to be back over here at the East Bulwark to find out all of what is left of that structure and to find many more secrets that lie hidden in James Fort.